Recording in progress.
Okay, hello guys, welcome. Um, Mike, mute yourself. Everyone mute yourself if you're not muted, please, because I have the attention span of a squirrel and I get distracted very easily. So, thanks. All right, so today we're talking about boundaries and communication, healthy, effective communication, mind you. Um, this is something everyone needs to be practicing. It is not like this new concept that's going to blow your minds, but the problem is no one practices this. And that is why I wanted to give a specific presentation on it. There's going to be real life examples. There is a little bit of an activity, but I don't know if we're going to have time to go into that today. I might just maybe send it out later. Or we can do it on the next call. But if everyone in here and everyone in the world could get really good at healthy boundaries and healthy communication, we would have a lot less problems in the fucking world. So that is my goal today. I'm going to share some knowledge with you guys. I'm going to give you some examples. And hopefully, there's no hopefully, if you pay attention, you should be able to start implementing this like ASAP. So let's go right in. I'm going to put this in present mode so Landa doesn't yell at me. Okie doke. All right, my friends, let's jump right the fuck in. So, what are even boundaries, right? So, boundaries are these kind of energetic, as just like what it sounds like, it's an energetic boundary or a verbal boundary that prevents issues happening in relationships, essentially, right? You can also have boundaries for your own personal self, your own personal life, which you should, right? But when we put in boundaries, it allows us to have a more effective and even more intimate relationship with people. And that doesn't even have to be on a romantic level. But if I put in a boundary that is healthy and respectable, and it allows you to show up as a better friend to me, therefore I feel more respected and loved, so I can show up as a better friend to you. You see my point? Like it's one big circle. Now there's going to be people, this is like somewhere in here in my presentation, there are going to be people that resist your boundaries. Those people are not for you. Someone that loves you, respects you, genuinely cares about you is going to respect your boundaries and uphold them. If they don't, snip, snip, snip. Okay. Some cues to kind of know, am I a people pleaser? So what, I'm sorry, if you need to put in boundaries, kind of fuck that up. Are you a people pleaser? Is right off the bat a really, really easy way to tell if you lack boundaries. I feel like a lot of us in the world are people pleasers in some way. Some are worse than others. But a people pleaser is like you're just basically like a yes man to anything that someone asks of you. And there's typically not a lot of reciprocity in a relationship with a people pleaser. And so that's why we kind of want to take our power back here and put in a healthy boundary so that we're not being taken advantage of. Right. So like notice, am I a people pleaser? Yes, in some ways, great. You need to put in some boundaries. And I want you guys to gauge this and like pay attention to where you fall, because by the end of this, you should have at least one person or situation where you are going to implement those new boundaries with. Okay. Another cue is, do you feel uncomfortable telling people no? Right. Like we feel like I have to put my foot down, I have to tell this person no, but it's giving me anxiety. It's making me really uncomfortable. This means we need to put in some healthy boundaries. All right. And then the last cue is, do you have people in your life that drain energy from you? We call these people energy vampires. And that's like when you let's say you're just having a conversation with someone, when you get off the phone, you feel drained. Or let's say you go hang out with this person and after you leave, you feel exhausted. That's an energy vampire. That person is draining the life from you, like quite literally. We have to put in boundaries there as well. So these are just three simple cues to kind of help you gauge, okay, do I need a boundary here or do I not? There's plenty other scenarios you could look at. But I think these are like just the most baseline things we need to acknowledge when we're trying to see, where do I need to put in some new boundaries? Unfortunately, a lot of us do lack healthy boundaries. It's part of it being a human. It's not something that we are taught in school, right? It's not, unless you have like really, really conscious and aware parents, it's not something we were taught at home. If anything, we were taught to become a people pleaser. We were taught to have our boundaries overridden constantly, right? Because that's what was modeled for us. So most of us don't even have any awareness of this, which is why I'm bringing it to your attention right now, because it can save your life. It can save relationships. It can save a lot of things as far as those interpersonal connections. So that's why I'm bringing it up today. Healthy boundaries actually preserve relationships. They do not ruin them. If you put in healthy boundaries in a respectable way, like the example I gave you earlier, the relationship can actually blossom, because now you're not feeling disrespected, you're not feeling taken advantage of, or you're not feeling unheard or unseen. And now you can get some reciprocity. And then we have like this beautiful cycle that can go as far as this relationship, right? So putting in boundaries actually makes the relationship better. It does not ruin it. If you attempt to put in boundaries that are healthy and respectful, and someone is like, well, I'm not going to do that, or why do I have to do that? Like, what's wrong with me? then that's not someone you need in your life anyways, right? So my point is boundaries clean everything out, whether that is blossoming a relationship or kicking one to the curb. Boundaries are going to show you like who's, essentially like who's really there for you, right? Who really cares about you? Who loves you unconditionally? Because a boundary is a condition, right? If a boundary makes my love for you conditional, then it was never unconditional in the first place, right? That means if you put in a boundary, I'm going to be upset, I'm going to have a problem, I'm not going to want to talk to you. That's conditional love, guys. We don't tolerate that, okay? We're done tolerating conditional love in 2024. So notice where that shows up for you in your life, okay? Now, a few things to touch on. Without boundaries, we, one, give all of our energy away for free, mostly with zero reciprocity, right? If we don't have a boundary with anybody or anything, especially like with work situations, then we're constantly giving and giving and giving and giving, and you're just emptying your cup constantly and no one is pouring back into yours, not even you. That is a problem, okay? Number two, without boundaries, we do things out of alignment with our core values, right? Just think about that for a second. It's actually a really simple concept if you just marinate on it a little bit. If we're out of alignment with someone, that means we're going to be bumping heads a lot, right? And that means that there's no boundary, right? If we're in misalignment of our core values and we're bumping heads a lot, we're getting into it constantly, we don't have any healthy boundaries in this relationship. So we need to assess and say, let's put in this boundary and see if things can get better. And if not, snip, snip, snip. Okay. I want you guys to like dream about me doing this tonight in your nightmares. Okay. Snip, snip, snip. Number three, without boundaries, we start to resent people. This is a big one, right? Because what happens if you don't put in a boundary and someone is constantly, you have someone in your life that's an energy vampire, it will get to a point if you don't address it. One of two things are going to happen. One, you ghost them, which whatever, more power to you. But either you're going to ghost them or you're going to start to get resentful. And when their name pops up on your phone, you're going to get irritated. You're going to start ignoring the calls, ignoring the texts. When they ask you for something, you're like, oh my God, here we go again. That's resentment building up over time. We don't want to hold resentment in our body. That's on a low ass frequency. You're extremely contracted down there. We want to be open to receive things, but you can't receive from someone like that. So put in a boundary or snip, snip, snip. Okay. And then number four, without boundaries, we feel burnout and used. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? Again, if we don't have boundaries and people are always taking from us, you're going to feel exhausted more frequently. You're going to get burnt out a lot faster, right? You're going to feel taken advantage of because someone is always constantly coming and draining you and you're not getting anything in return. Again, boundary or snip, snip. And then lastly, finally, you are going to constantly feel stretched thin if you don't have boundaries in place, but because if this person asks you to do something, you're going to do it. And then this person, and then this person, and then your boss, and then your sister, and then your best friend. And you're constantly saying yes, you're going to be stretched extremely thin. And now there's no energy left for you to put into yourself or into your own personal desires, which doesn't seem fair. I don't know about you guys, but it does not seem fair to me. Another reason why we need to put those in place. And then lastly, on this particular topic, certain people will be resistant to your boundaries at first. That is not your problem. That is, and this is not me being a bitch or being negative or being an asshole, but if you put in a healthy boundary and it is respectable and it is reasonable and someone gets pissed off at you, that's a them problem. That is not a you problem, right? You are not responsible for anyone else's emotions or reactions aside from your own. That's baseline, right? And again, we are a lot of times taught the opposite as children, and we are taught to be responsible for our parents' happiness and emotions, or our siblings. We have to take care of them, make sure they're good. And that carries over into other relationships. It carries over into workplace relationships. It carries over into romantic relationships. So my point is, you got to get it at the source, or it's going to start bleeding into other areas of your life. Okay. So again, if you say, hey, this is a boundary for me, it makes me very uncomfortable, or it makes me feel unloved or unheard or unseen. And I would really appreciate it if you could not do that anymore. And someone gets pissed. What are you going to do? Come on, guys. I've done it 20 times already. Snip, snip, snip. Exactly. There you go. That's pretty much it. You'll know if someone is in this energetic space if when you say that and you voice your boundary and your feelings, they start to feel attacked. They start to get defensive. They start to project their own wounds onto you. And the messed up part there is a lot of times people won't even know that they're projecting their own wounds onto you. Like, unless they've done, some work and they're very conscious and aware of it. But a lot of times people will not even know that that's what they're doing. And it's like, do you want to constantly have that push and pull, interaction with that person to kind of get them to see what's going wrong? Or do you want to snip, snip, snip? That's totally your discernment, but just notice, where do you want to put that effort, right? Constantly use your discernment. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, just with under this umbrella specifically, is we put in boundaries regardless of age. And I say that because I know a lot of us have issues with putting in boundaries with like our parents or even our grandparents, because they have like that older generation mindset of, well, I'm the elder, so I'm always right. That's bullshit. Your age does not mean anything. I'm so sorry. I'd have to tell my grandma this all of the damn time. She's like, well, I'm the elder. And I'm like, well, my love, respect is a two-way street. So your age has nothing to do with it. She doesn't like that too much. But I have to remind her, because she kind of sometimes steps back into that entitled space where she's overstepping my boundaries, not intentionally, just how she's been for 70 years. But I have to remind her, age does not mean that my boundaries are invalid because you think that you hold some higher authority than I do. We are on the same level as far as respect and love, right? And if that be the case, your age has nothing to do with this boundary that I put in. As long as it is respectful, that has nothing to do with it. So just notice, if you're putting in boundaries with parents or grandparents or whatever, a boss maybe that's a little bit older, you might get a little bit of pushback sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that you guys have two different styles of thinking. So again, just use your discernment, assess if wording or a conversation needs to be adjusted a little bit, but just start to be aware of those people in your life. Okay, so now we're gonna go over a couple examples of boundary setting. Let me get real close to the screen because I'm blind. I figured I could just mainly do a two-parter here because these are the most common ones. I feel like people get taken advantage of a lot at work, and a lot of people do not speak up for themselves in work environments. So I wanted to put this one in here. And then obviously I hear this last one a fucking lot. It is insane how much I hear it on mindset calls, but people struggle with boundaries within just family, right? Family members. So here are two really good examples. Excuse me. Okay, so number one, the work example. So let's say your boss constantly gives you extra tasks or cases or files or whatever, which extends the hours you work each week by 10 hours regularly. And let's say your salary. So you get paid for 40 hours a week, but you are constantly working 50 hours a week, right? Your boss doesn't ask you nicely, and you never get paid extra for this. He asks no one else because he knows that you will always say yes. There's an issue, right? Like we can see clearly that there's no boundary, right? This has been going on for about 5 months now. How to implement a healthy boundary in this specific situation. I understand that work environments can be a little bit intimidating when it comes to putting in a boundary, but just because you work underneath someone does not mean that you don't have a voice, right? So what can be helpful is kind of like game plan it before you go into the conversation, right? Like write out, what do I really want to say? Let me, check this really quickly to make sure that it's, it is unbiased and that it's not disrespectful. And just practice a few times. Like if I'm having a big conversation with someone, I typically try to just run over like what I want to touch on to make sure that I say it correctly and I don't misspeak. So if this encounter would make you uncomfortable, I would practice the lines before you actually go and have the conversation. But regardless, so you go in, you want to put a boundary in, and so this is what it would look like. Hey boss, do you have a quick second about something that's really important to me? You wait for their response. You do not just go into a conversation and start word vomiting on people, even if they're in the wrong. You do not disrespect someone's energy and time like that, right? So regardless of who you're talking to, you get permission before you just start bleh, always, right? So let's say boss responds like, yeah, I got a minute, what's up? And you say, thank you. For the last 5 months, I've noticed that you have only asked me to complete extra assignments, which adds up to an extra 10 hours of unpaid work per week. To be honest, this does make me feel taken advantage of. I would love to come to an understanding where I can still support you, but be compensated as well, if that is an option. Would we be able to dive into this a bit deeper now or at a later date? I was not disrespectful. I was clear. I brought up the facts. I gave multiple outcomes. I didn't just assume what he should do for me, right? I said, I would love to come to an understanding where I can still support you. So I'm still offering my help, but to hold myself to a higher standard, I expect to be compensated, but I'm not going to force that upon you. So I'm going to say, if this is even an option. So I just covered all of my bases so he can't get defensive now. The way I worded that cuts every rejection out. I'm sorry, not rejection, objection. It cuts every objection out. Now, if someone still has an objection to this, now we gotta, which one do we want to do? We want to keep working with this, or we want to snip, 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 go get a new job? Which one do we want to do, right? Because if it's a workplace environment, and this is somewhere that you spend 40 to 50 hours of your time every single week, you stay there consciously more than you do at home. Do you want to spend your work life in an environment like that? So again, use your discernment. Good, solid example. Does that make sense, everyone? Nodding heads, cool. All right, example number 2 is going to be the family example. And I feel like this one will resonate with damn near everybody on this call. So let's say it's your cousin, right? Your cousin calls you several times each week, unannounced. And I say unannounced because she is inconsiderate of your work schedule, your personal schedule. She just fucking calls you. Excuse me. Every phone call is either to ask for something or to talk about her life. She typically doesn't ask about you or support you. All right. So we already can see that this is an energy vampire and there's a boundary that needs to go up immediately. This has gone on for years, though. So now we really got to be clear and concise. Okay. So a healthy boundary would be, hey, Francesca, I don't know, stole the British name. Hey, Francesca, over the last couple of years, our relationship, you typically come to me asking for things or for me to listen to you vent. While I don't mind supporting you from time to time, this has felt like a one-sided relationship for quite some time. Because I love you and want to maintain our relationship, it would make me feel seen and heard if we could go over some boundaries and also be open to shifting our conversations back to me at certain times. How does that land? Boom. I stated the facts. I was not disrespectful. I was not rude. I was not condescending. I put the ball back in her court so she can tell me how she wants to proceed. Easy peasy. Not saying it's comfortable to have the conversation, but what we actually need to touch on and how we need to have the conversation is the simple part. Just takes a little bit of practice. Cool. Make sense, guys? Awesome. Now, if you want another example for maybe your own personal life, I know Francesca, she's gonna be pissed though. Shut up, damn. If you guys want your own personal like little script, if you will, like let's say there's a hard conversation that you need to have in your life, and you're like, I don't know how to word this. I could really use some support. Then please just message me. I don't mind like scripting you something like this. This did not take me long, so let me know. I think I have one more slide here. Okay, so guys, with effective communication, I think I've dropped this to you guys before. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna put it in the chat. There is this book that I read years ago, and it helped me sculpt how to be more effective when I'm having conversations. And obviously with running a business, you have to get really good at talking to people regardless. So I just started building on whatever I learned from that book. And it really does change everything. The book is called Nonviolent Communication. I'm putting it in the chat. I think I've shared it with you guys before, but I don't remember. And it's by Marshall Rosenberg, I believe. It's Marshall's PhD, so just make sure you see that when you pick the book. And I'm also going to drop a screenshot of it in the actual group chat just because I feel like there's multiple books like with this title, and I want to make sure you guys get the right one. But if you read this book, it'll change how you view conversations in general. It'll pull you away from thinking that people are just out to attack you or they're being mean to you, and it makes you feel like a shitty person. So you can actually understand people's intentions in conversations or lack of intentions, which makes shit really messy. Okay, so give it a view. It's not a long book either. They also have it on Audible. Anyways, okay, so with effective communication, I just want to give you guys a few tips, if you will, on how to have conversations a little bit more with ease. I don't want to say comfort because I personally think all challenging conversations are just uncomfortable as fuck, but there's different ways you can navigate them. So tip number 1 is try your best. I'm not saying it's going to happen all of the time because when we are triggered, when our nervous systems are activated, we can get away from like, some of the more appropriate ways to talk to someone, right? But just try to be aware and pull yourself back. You want to typically try to avoid you language. Okay. So you language is like you're getting upset and you're getting defensive. And so you start projecting your own shit on that person, right? You're like, well, you never support me and you don't care. And you always do this to me and you. And it's like, well, if someone came to me and started pointing fingers at me, I would feel defensive as well. So let's try to calm down how much we're using that language, try to cut it out over time as much as you can. But this is very like accusatory language, and it's only going to make the person you're talking to, is only going to make them feel defensive. And if someone feels defensive, the conversation is not going to go very smoothly, right? It's only going to escalate shit. So try to pull that back. Now, if someone, I think I put it in here somewhere, I don't know. But if you're trying to communicate how someone made you feel repetitively over and over and over again, a good way to frame that is, again, we're not pointing the finger, but we can say something like, I've noticed lately that when you do X, Y, and Z, it really makes me feel whatever, unloved, not heard, not seen, taken advantage of, blah, blah, blah. So that's a clear way to communicate it without saying you. Okay. So there's a little bit of a difference there. Number two, try your best to never have a hard conversation. Guys, I call arguments hard conversations or creative discussions. I just feel like argument is such a negative X word. So try your best to never have a hard conversation while yelling. I feel like this is very common knowledge, but a lot of people just naturally get elevated inside of a hard conversation and volume just increases and now we're yelling at each other. Sometimes people don't even realize that they're yelling. I can tell you guys how many times I'm talking to my grandmother and she just starts yelling and I'm like, Gram, like, what the fuck? Why are you yelling, bro? I'll talk to her just like that, by the way. And she's like, I'm sorry, I'm just used to talking to your grandfather. And I'm like, okay, I get that because they yell at each other all the time. So my point is, someone might not know that they're yelling, and sometimes you can just simply bring it to their awareness. Like, hey, like, I'm not sure if you noticed, but you started yelling and it's making me a little bit uncomfortable. Cool. Let me pull back a little bit. Right. So try your best to not do that. If it does get heightened to where you both start yelling at each other, what you should do, what I recommend you do is take a quick break, then come back to the conversation later. Like, we're not going to get anywhere if we're both pissed the fuck off, right? So it could be a simple like, hey, like, I'm noticing that we're both like really heightened and really upset right now. Do you want to take like a quick 20-minute break and come back to it? Or do you want to just talk about it again tomorrow? Try not to push it past 48 hours though. You want to talk about it while it's still fresh. But it is totally okay if, people having the conversation need to pull apart for a quick second. So we can compose ourselves, regulate our nervous system, and then come back and talk while we're actually calm. Right. Again, should be common knowledge. Common knowledge isn't so common though. Number three, when wanting to have a hard conversation, first present consideration and intimacy, guys. Again, we don't want to just throw our shit at someone, even if they are in the wrong. We don't want to just come in hot and like, oh my God, you did this and you did that, and I feel so terrible. And ask permission first. Respect people's energy, respect people's time, respect their mental capacity. We all deal with a lot of shit in our everyday lives. How good would it feel if someone came to you first and said, hey, do you have a minute for me to vent? Or do you have the mental capacity for me to vent to you really quickly? That is so fucking considerate. Hey, do you have time for a quick phone call? This is one of the many beautiful reasons why I value Mike and I's friendship. We respect each other's boundaries in a very healthy capacity. And not everyone is open to that, right? But we never just want to throw shit at someone. Hey, do you have the mental capacity to talk to me about something that's been bothering me really quick? And they're either going to say, yeah, sure, or actually, I'm a little bit tired right now. Can we talk about it later? Yeah, no problem. Easy peasy. But we want to be considerate and we want to create like more of an intimate environment to be doing this in. Number four, always use facts to support your piece, right? Not accusations, not your own personal triggers, but you have to use facts. And these facts must be able to be upheld in a court of law. So it can't be like your opinion, right? So if I'm bringing something to a boss or maybe something that's like a little bit less intimate, I would honestly, guys, I would word it just like this. Hey, so I've been noticing that you've been doing X, Y, and Z lately. It makes me feel X, Y, and Z. But the facts is that you have shown up to work late 3 times a week for the last month, and you have not submitted your end of day reports every single day. See what I mean? So like, instead of them, you don't want to give them a reason to kind of gaslight you or try to turn the tables when in fact, like, you have some good solid evidence. You want to respectfully speak your piece, but only based on facts, right? So speak that first, and then later, if it still made you feel some type of way, then you can say, and when you did those things, it made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like whatever, you know what I mean? But you have to communicate those separately. Don't intertwine your feelings and with facts in the conversation, or try your best not to. You still express them. I'm not telling you not to express your emotions, but if you can, try to keep them a little bit separate, because when that shit gets messed up and when we're having a creative discussion, it's going to get very messy. So try to talk about them separately, but definitely bring them up for sure. Okay. And then we have, when wanting to express how the other person made you feel, I just said this basically, but when wanting to express how the other person made you feel with their words or actions, it is important to initiate saying, when you said or did X, it made me feel blank, right? So we're not saying that you're a piece of shit and you treat me like garbage. It's like, no, when you specifically say, or when you specifically do, this, it makes me feel unloved, unseen, not worthy, not good enough, stupid. I feel like you're being condescending, right? Actually, that's a bad example. Don't say, I feel like you. It makes me feel. Because again, I feel like you, that goes back to you language, which you don't want to use. Bad example, actually. So definitely use that. Honestly, like this is such a very easy way to start implementing a boundary if you don't feel comfortable with like, texting someone an entire novel, which I get. You can simply say, hey, so I've been noticing this lately in our friendship or our relationship, and I wanted to bring it to your awareness because our relationship is important to me and I want it to continue to grow. So when you say blank, it honestly makes me feel very blank. That's it. That's all you gotta say. Very simple to implement that one. Two more. So never leave a conversation until both parties feel complete, guys. Just don't. It's a little inconsiderate. It leaves too much to the imagination. It allows people to start creating different scenarios in their head. It might even cause more distance between the two. And if that's not what you want, you're doing yourself a disservice. So to make sure that both parties feel complete, I'm not saying you feel happy by the end of the conversation, but you feel complete in what your needs are met, you were heard, you guys have agreed, or you've agreed to disagree, making sure that you guys are complete. So easy ways to say this are, you could just ask right out, like, so after this conversation, like, do you feel complete now? That's a good way to ask it. Or you can ask them, what else? Is there anything else you want to say? Or you can ask, is there something that you're not saying that you don't feel comfortable saying to me? And then another one would be, what do you need from me right now in this moment to make you feel a little bit better, if anything? Right. So I've covered all my bases by making sure that I'm not invalidating the other person's experience and make sure that we both feel complete. Okay. And then lastly, again, this one should be common sense, but common sense ain't so common. Please don't talk over people or cut them off. It's very, very simple, guys. Let them speak. Even if they're wrong, if you think they're wrong, let them say their piece. And then once they're done talking, then you can come back and say, I really quickly just want to circle back to that thing you said. Like, just pull up your work email etiquette, right? I want to circle back to that one thing you just said. Because from my personal experience, that's actually not true. And I think that, we need to come to a level of agreement on that, because that's not my experience. But do not cut someone off while they are talking. A lot of times when people get loud in conversation, or they try to talk over you or cut you off, it is 9 times out of 10 coming from their past where they were not seen or heard. And so now, present day, they feel like the only way for me to be heard is to get really loud or to talk over you or to cut you off. That is the only possible way I'm going to be heard. So don't take it personally. It's, guys, the way people act or react or show up, it has nothing to do with you. 9 times out of 10, it never has anything to do with you. So don't take it so personally, right? And notice if you like get that urge inside of you, like, oh, I want to cut that person off, or like, I want to start yelling, I want to talk over them. Do you not feel heard, maybe? Because you can express that without cutting someone off. So again, just be very, very aware. I think that's all I got for you guys. Oh yeah, or we could do some boundary practice. What do you think, Mike? Should we just do a little bit of Q&A and say this for a later discussion, or should we just full send it? And this will probably take about, well, depending, 10-ish minutes, maybe 15.
Yeah, full send it.
Full send it. Okay, cool. All right, guys, get out your pen and paper, or the note section of your phone is totally fine as well. Grab that shit. Oh, look who's here, right on time.
Best. The best. Session's over. We just finished.
Kidding. I can't see her on my screen. Is she connected to audio so she can hear me?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
Jazz, if you can hear us.
Just something. One in the chat. Anything.
Blink twice. Okay.
You can just drop it in the chat then. Oh yeah, she can hear us. We're good.
Okay. Yeah, she's
okay, guys. So like I was saying, we're gonna practice some boundaries. And what I want you guys to do is I want you to think of at least one relationship in your life. We all have, if you're gonna say, oh, I don't have anyone in my life that I need a boundary with, bullshit. There's always somewhere where you can expand, right? Maybe there's a situation where it's not terrible, but it could use a little bit of work. That is totally fine. excuse me, but I want you to think of a relationship in your life, whether it's in work, whether it is romantic, whether it's just family, maybe it's a friend, but think of a relationship in your life where you could benefit from setting boundaries. Where you feel like you really need to put in some boundaries because it's starting to drain you, or maybe you're starting to get annoyed, or maybe you don't feel heard, or maybe you feel like it's not a two-way street relationship. But think about that clearly. And when you have that, drop a one in the chat. We're making this one very interactive. Don't try me, try your mama. Drop a one in the chat when you have it.
What did you say?
I said, don't try me, try your mama. Listen, if I don't make everyone at least giggle on this call, like what is the point of me being here?
That's my new line this week. I'm gonna say.
In the John will get this. In the Black community, we have a saying, and it's when Black moms are like, I'm not one of your little friends. So it kind of comes from, yeah. He gets it. To this day, she was not wrong. She definitely was not one of my little friends. So yeah. Anyways, do we all have that ideal conversation or person ready to go? What's up with this? Is pissing me off. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for this one. We don't need to share here. Okay. So let's go into it. So what I want you to write out, I'm gonna type it in the chat as well, but you guys can start writing on it now. We're gonna go over a few prompts, a few questions, if you will. One, what is the primary issue in this relationship? I want you to write that down clearly. What is the primary issue in this relationship? AKA, why do I need to put in a boundary? So write that down. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Question one in the chat. All right, guys. I'm gonna put the other two in the chat as well. So you have them, you can start working on them. So number two is, how would both parties benefit from the new boundaries? And then number three is, how does it make me feel to implement these new boundaries and why? Does it make you feel anxious? Does it make you nervous? Does it make you scared? Does it make you uncomfortable? Notice what that is. And where does that come from? Where do you think it comes from? Why does it make you feel that way? I'll give you guys a few minutes here to answer those, and then you can just drop a one in the chat when you are done. Dan, I just saw your playlist, Suicide by Nostalgia. Love that.
I knew you were gonna like it.
Dude, this is actually a really good playlist.
Why would it be a bad playlist? What the fuck?
Oh my God, this is actually so good.
Send it to me.
Oh my God, I am crying. Pwn to replay. Let's go. Come on, Dan.
What can I do if my mom won't respect the boundary I'm trying to set? Ooh. Ash.
Um, Jazz. I know you weren't here for the beginning part of my presentation, but
Snip, snip, snip. You can't do that. Well, can you?
I mean, technically you can. I cut my mom off for my entire life up until recently.
Oh, okay. There we go.
But if you don't want to cut her off immediately, and sometimes it doesn't matter what we want, it's just what we have to do. But Jazz, it depends, right? I would need to know, how are you setting the boundary? Like, how are you giving it to her? How are you reiterating? I can't talk today. Are you reiterating it at all? How have you presented it to her? Have you guys had an actual conversation about the boundary and she's completely rejected it? Like, I need a little bit more context before I give you an exact answer. So you can either put it in here and share, or you can
I'm gonna unmute just to
Okay.
be safe.
That's fair. That's fine.
It'll be quick though. So no, I think I talked to you and Mike actually about this, where my mom, she needs help. She always might have she has appointments, things that come up, and she always kind of needs someone to be able to take her somewhere or pick her up from an appointment or something that she has to go do for health reasons. And I don't mind doing it, but I have told her, you need to give me heads up. So like if she has an appointment, that's obviously something that she knows is coming up.
Right.
And if she knows that she needs someone to take her, I told her, just let me know as soon as you have that appointment, or, give me at least a week's notice or something,
Right.
for stuff that she can give advance notice on.
Mhm.
So for stuff like that, that's worked out perfectly fine. But there are times where it seems last minute she'll need me to come do something she can't do herself, or
Mhm.
she's asking me, and I just feel that guilt of like, it's not
Mhm.
that I don't want to help you, but I've told you, like, give me a heads up, at least, like, hey, if it's same day, at least in the morning. And I have told her, I
Mhm.
need a little bit of warning so I can move things around if I need to, make adjustments that work for me so I can help her.
Right. Yeah.
So how can I keep reinforcing that so
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't go crazy?
Well, you first need to work on your guilt. And we talked about this, because the answer is consequences have what? Actions. I'm sorry, actions have consequences.
Yeah.
Flip that. Flip that. Actions have consequences. And you've already informed her several times that you cannot do things last minute. And again, I think this is an older school mindset, because my grandparents, same fucking way. My mom, if I tell her you have to let me know when you want to talk so I can put it in my schedule, she's like, I don't have to make a fucking appointment. I'm your mother. So it's just that old school thinking, right? So if you've already told her respectfully several times, like, hey, mom, I need you to give me a heads up because I cannot do things last minute, and she's still giving you things last minute, your job is to hold her accountable to that by saying, hey, mom, I've told you in the past that I can't do things last minute because of my own schedule. So I actually can't take you to this thing today. Do you think you could get someone else to do it? That's your job. That is it. She's not going to like it at first, but again, you are not responsible for her actions, right? Or her emotions, even though you've been trained to be that your entire life.
Yep. I was gonna say something similar.
Not fun, but that's just the reality of it. So I already know what face she's making, so it's fine. Okay, she's good. She's like, got it. All right, guys. I want at least one share, preferably two, on boundaries. Does anyone want to offer up as tribute, or should I start picking on people?
I can go ahead.
Oh, Dan, my baby. Let's go. Give it to me.
Tribute.
I like it when you call it my baby.
I know you do. Anyways.
So this one is I wrote this one thinking about
a previous relationship I had, which was long distance.
Mhm.
So this is what I wrote, so I don't forget. But basically, and to summarize it, what's the biggest issue with a long distance relationship is that most interactions are done during the distance periods, right?
Mhm.
Most interactions are done through text, chat, or maybe video calls, which are not as effective as a communication way, especially when you're talking about intimate relationships.
Mhm.
So because you cannot read like reactions, or you cannot read emotion as much, especially through text. So both parties benefits through putting boundaries, especially on what you like, what you don't like, the things they do. When they text on way, when they do not text, maybe you feel like you're left out, or maybe you feel different things. Both parties benefit through that. And three, how does it make you feel? Warm in my belly, because you feel connected to the other person, especially when you know what the other person wants, and you
Yeah.
know that what you're doing makes the other person feel good, and you love that person, of course.
Yeah.
If you don't, whatever. But if you do, you're probably gonna feel good. So
Yeah.
that was my example.
Beautiful.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Very beautiful. I love that. Yeah, and that's that's also another good thing to touch on, guys, is yes, boundaries, but also expectations in relationships, right? We all have different needs. We all have very different expectations. I always tell all my clients, a need not expressed is a need not met. So like your expectations of what you desire in a relationship might be very different than what someone else expects. So it's very important, like Dan said, is to go over those things to make sure that you guys are on the same page. You're both getting what you need. And now we have a two-way street relationship. Beautiful. Expectations and boundaries will save a lot of heartache. Beautiful example, Dan. Does anyone else want to share?
I'm letting everyone else go.
Um, Mine is directed towards my nephew.
Mhm.
He's younger than me, about 6 years, and the main issue is he'll come to me for advice. Well, hold on. First, I gotta say I'm kind of a perpetrator at this as well. We'll go to each other for advice, but refuse to listen.
Mhm.
We'll come up with excuses, and the boundary I want to set up is to basically stop, not fully stop it, but try to give each other time to try to figure out our own issues first before going to each other. But it makes me a little nervous because I don't want him to feel like I'm not there for him and he can't talk to me about anything.
Mm-hmm. Yes, beautiful. Thank you for sharing, love. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've actually had a relationship like that before, a friendship, so I get it. So I would even kind of circle back to what I was telling Dan, and that's in this situation, I would also say that different expectations need to be expressed, right? Because I feel like, you seem like you're very aware of it, but like, is he aware of it? You know what I mean? So getting clear on it. It's not that we can't continue to go to each other for advice, but we both need to work on listening and holding space for each other. So, and that can be really hard. Again, like if you, like I was talking about earlier, if you felt like you weren't super seen or heard as a child, then you feel the need to like just talk because you didn't have that space held for you when you were younger. So it makes a lot of sense. But what you guys need to do is start holding space for each other. So like, for example, when I am talking to my sister, she's also a very self-aware, conscious human, we give each other the ball, so to speak, right? So it's like, first I'm like, so what's up? Like, what do you want to talk about? She'll vent to me. I will hold space. I will not talk over her. I will listen. I will ask her, like, do you want advice or did you just want to vent that out? She's like, oh, well, I could use some advice. Then I'm going to give her my advice, or I'm going to be quiet if she didn't want that. And then that's when she will say, okay, thank you for listening. Now, what do you want to express? So like we can still both vent, talk shit, whatever, whoopty whoop, but we both need to hold space for each other versus constantly talking over each other. Well, this is my problem. Well, this is my problem. So you guys can continue that relationship, but I would just set the expectation of I really want us to start working on listening to each other as well so that we both feel heard in this friendship or this relationship. Right. So it's a small little expectation that can be communicated. Yes, like you said, he's younger than you. So maybe you could word it a little bit differently so that he actually digests it. But at the end of the day, I think if you say it clearly, he's gonna understand. And I understand like it might make you nervous, but excuse me, again, just expressing to him like, hey, we're still gonna talk. Like, I still want to hear about your life and your problems, but I think we also need to listen to each other as well. And like, that's a very simple way to put it. Like, he shouldn't get defensive. Obviously, I don't know him, but he shouldn't get defensive if he worded it that way. So yeah, if you want and you need some support, I'd like, again, I don't mind typing out like a little script for you. You can send it to him or whatever. But I think that's a pretty simple fix. I don't say easy, simple fix. But does that make sense?
It does. Because the main things is he's a new father. He's going to be a year next
Oh,
month. And while I don't have kids myself, I basically help raise my brother, daughters, and raise other kids.
mhm.
So when he comes to me for advice, he'll listen, but then he'll take and dismiss everything and
Mm,
does what he wants.
gotcha. I see. Okay. Well, Mike.
Dismissing how?
He'll do exactly the opposite of what I say, or he'll
Mm,
go to somebody else who's older, like my father, and he'll ask him. And once he tells me the same thing, or
So
either
he just wants to be validated. He just wants
yes,
to find people that's gonna say what he's
yeah.
what
trying
he
to
want to
eventually
hear,
do.
yes.
If he's
Mm,
doing the opposite, he just
yeah.
wants to be validated.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Honestly, that one you probably shouldn't ask me because I'm the queen of cutting people off. But that would be a situation where I drastically pull back, and I would pull back for like maybe a couple weeks. I don't know how often you guys talk, but if you talk weekly, I'd pull back for a couple of weeks, and then I would bring it to his awareness. And I would, now that the way you explained it now this is a boundary for me personally, because why the fuck are you coming to talk to me then? Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? So I would even say like, hey, typically when you come to me and ask for advice, I'm always here to support you, but typically you don't take that advice. You either do the opposite or you go to someone else. And I honestly don't feel very honored in this friendship because you react that way. Did you still want me to continue to give advice? Like, again, word it for however feels like most comfortable for you, but I would still bring it to his awareness because that's, uh, for lack of better terms, it's kind of fucked up. So,
Because we had this argument before over something else,
mhm.
and he changed for a little bit, and he did listen, but then he get around certain people, like around his friends, and he'll take and try to show off again.
Mhm.
So for a while, I did take and come off, and I wasn't talking to him because we talk nearly every day.
Okay. Okay.
And I had stopped answering all his messages, stopped answering his phone calls.
Mm,
And when I finally did answer, we was able to finally sit down and talk like normal people.
okay.
But I think I'm gonna do that again, just so we had the conversation. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I would. I definitely would, especially if it's someone, because the unfortunate reality is that sometimes when we want to put in a boundary with someone, or if we want to kind of, you know, not alter, audit our friendships or relationships with people, just because you're ready for them to change doesn't mean they're ready to change. And a lot of times we have to use our own discernment. Like, am I comfortable with am I comfortable waiting to see if this person is capable of change in this capacity, or am I not willing to wait on that? That's up to you. The ball's fully in your court. So for example, with my sister, she honestly, how you're saying your cousin or friend, or I'm sorry, brother, whatever. My sister used to be the exact same way. Completely. She was a hot fucking mess, for lack of better terms. But because I kept throwing it back to her, like, hey, you're doing this again. You're doing this again. I kept re-guiding her, rerouting her. Now she's one of my closest best friends and one of the most aware people I know. Because but that was my choice. I chose not to give up on her. You have to use your discernment. Like, is this person someone I want to keep going to bat for? Or am I losing more than I'm gaining in this relationship? So that's on you. You have to decide, like, do I want to keep pushing, keep having the conversation, constantly reminding people, or do I not want to? And a lot of times people will be worth it. And sometimes people will not. But you have to decide. That one is totally up to you, babe.
okay, because I really do feel like he's worth it because he's one of the few people I could say that has been that has stuck by my side through all these years.
Mhm.
And I stood by his side. I defended him a lot. He defended me, and I just want to make sure that our relationship stays at least decent
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah, then I think that's totally fair. Then you just keep nudging him, keep reminding him, as long as he's not like projecting his bullshit onto you and being like rude or condescending. I think that's totally fine. Some people are worth, definitely some people are worth the fight, 100%. So I think that's okay.
Because I also had to take and cut my brother off for a while a
Yeah.
couple of years ago because our issue with my issue with my brother was he didn't see me as a grown adult. He still saw me as his kid, little brother
Mm-hmm.
that he had to protect, and had to tell him that I'm not that same little kid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So when I finally took and cut him off, stopped answering his phone calls, we didn't talk to each other for about over a year.
Yeah.
And finally, I decided to take and reach out to him and try to take and have the conversation with him. And that's when he broke down and told me that he really missed me and he really understood.
Oh,
And now, now our relationship is very close. He
there
gets my nerves, but
yeah,
that's brothers.
exactly. Yep. See, there's a good example. Like it was worth it then. Just use your discernment. And sometimes those breaks are very powerful. Like before my sister came back into my life, we didn't talk for probably like, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months. But once she came back, she was a whole new person. So like, yeah, again, use your discernment, trust your gut. But again, some people they just won't be ready when you want them to be ready. But you can always wait on them if you want to. So beautiful. Love that for you. Awesome sauce. All right, does anyone else want to share? We're pretty much up on time, but this was a good one. I enjoyed it. I guess I can stop recording now, huh?